Fox News and their silliness, because I think what's going on right now is Fox and the Republicans are trying to figure out what their brand is post-Trump and how to do what they've done so well. But now there's this whole there's just other forces at play. So I was asked to go on Fox News yesterday, and I only do the news shows now because it's just too crazy. So on a Fox News segment yesterday, I took on the idea that AOC wants to cancel members of the GOP who have enabled Trump and played a key role in his administration. It's not a matter of cancel culture. It's a matter of holding people accountable to their conservative record and for preventing necessary progress for the people. So let's play the clip really quick, the first part of the clip, because they're talking about a blacklist is what essentially they're saying, that not Hillary's, that's usually who they say, that AOC wants to create a blacklist. Dorsey, can we play the first part?
Is anyone archiving these Trump sycophants for when they try to downplay or deny their complicity in the future? I foresee decent probability of many deleted tweets, writings, photos in the future. Let's bring in Nomiki Konst, former Bernie Sanders national surrogate and former New York City public advocate candidate. Nomiki, good to see you. It doesn't seem to me that AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, is looking for the unity that Joe Biden is calling for, because she wants to cancel anybody who was ever worked in the Trump administration, and his supporters as well. Your thoughts on that?
Well, I don't think that's exactly what she said. I think what she was trying to make a point of was this rehabilitation of folks. For instance, the Lincoln Project is a perfect example. The Lincoln Project was founded by a group of George W. Bush administration officials, people who led us to the Iraq War, people who fought Democrats their entire lives. But suddenly, as soon as Donald Trump was a little bit too far, they said, no, we're going to start an organization and literally raise tens of millions of dollars, almost $100 million off of Democrats who want to defeat Trump. And now they're going to use that money to rebuild the Republican Party, the Democratic money and the Democratic data. So I think what she's trying to do is make a point that these political operatives like to rehabilitate themselves and look for their next shtick, their next gig, as the tides go in a different direction. And, they should be held accountable, at least in terms of their record. I don't mean canceling, but they should, if they're going to run as Republicans, then be a Republican.
Listen, if she's trying to make a point, then those who are following her lead are not getting it, because the Trump Accountability Project writes here the following, quoting here, remember what they did, talking about Trump supporters. We should not allow the following groups of people to profit from their experience. Those who elected him, that's 70 million people. Those who staffed his government, those who funded him, that's the Trump Accountability Project. Molly Hemingway, by the way, counters that by saying, I'd say rounding up 70 million Americans for political punishment is a bit ambitious.
We'll get to that second part in a second, because it gets a little bit crazier. The reason why I wanted to bring this up, because I do think that there's a very real question about what happens to these folks. Republicans are able to get away with distancing themselves from Trump, making a ton of money off of it, and then going right back to the party, using Trump's data, using the Democratic's data, and rebuilding. Where do we go from here? How are we going to be able to hold them accountable without having Fox News segments saying that we're calling for the rounding up of whatever they were trying to say? Napoleon, I saw you shaking your head. What do you think?
Well, I think she makes a good point, AOC, to preempt what the next move that they're going to make, which is obvious. It's like they're going to need to be held accountable and wear it on their jacket moving forward. And people forget real fast. You know what I mean? And I think it's our job not to allow them to forget. And I think also the Democrats did a poor job linking certain Republicans to Trump directly. And if they had done that, they would have kind of been irredeemable in that sense, where it's like you are a Trumpist. You can't play back and forth and act brand new like you're somebody new now. Like you know what you were doing for that for that person or for that philosophy, and you're gonna try to jump ship now. So I think we need to keep reminding people who was doing what and when.
Yeah, I mean, Joshua, you were an anti-war activist in the Bush years, and my God, the rehabilitation of Bush's image is just the perfect. It's like this should be the stamp in front of us at all times. If Democrats are not willing to take on someone's record, their legacy for the long term, then what are we even doing? How do we make sure we don't make those mistakes this time?
Well, I mean, if Biden's whole campaign message is that he wants to be a healer, And anyone who does group healing will tell you that accountability is integral to healing. And that, and so, Obama's choice to not prosecute the Bush administration and say, we're going to look forward, not backwards on torture, has had huge consequences for us not being able to reckon with or repair our culture. And I think the same thing is if the Biden administration is serious about healing, they will actually go after and not just prosecute the Trump administration, but do what y'all are talking about, which is, the opposite of what the Democratic Party has been doing, which is they've been actively rehabilitating these people from the beginning and distancing the GOP from Trump. So I also think it's funny in that clip. No, I just am always amazed at your poise and patience when you go on Fox News, the way they talk about, like cancel culture means anything now, right? Like making sure that people are not in positions of structural power who have actively harmed us. That's called politics, right? That's not like personal shaming to drive a regular person out of their work or free speech. Right. That's just politics. And it's amazing the way the backflips that they'll do to justify being chameleons based on, being able to shift their tone depending on the time.
Well, I think it's really important for us to understand, and it's also my strategy when I go on Fox News too. These are two things that go hand in hand. Don't let them define it for you. You have to define it for them. And if they defined Hillary Clinton for 30 years, and Hillary didn't have her definition until, frankly, ever in the campaign. They asked her a couple days before the election, why are you running for president? And she couldn't answer the question. You've been running since you were 12 years old. You can't answer the question. So, you have to know who you are. You have to do your message. You have to define it before they can define it for you. And if they are going to, you have to flip it back at them. So with that, I want to share the second part, which is just kind of funny more than anything. But also, it does speak to a greater narrative, which the Democrats are falling for. Can we play the second part of that clip, the Molly Hemingway part?
But it is kind of on brand for a socialist, I guess.
Oh my goodness. Okay, first off, that's not what they said. Those who elected them, the operatives who elected him, who are going to move on to
So Molly Hemingway, just to remind folks, was saying that can we just flash it on screen? Sorry, Dorsey, just so we can see it. The beginning, can you just show the tweet? Yeah, so it says, I'd say rounding up 70 million Americans for political punishment is a bit ambitious, meaning the people who voted for Trump. But it is kind of on brand for a socialist, I guess. Now we can play it just to let people know what we were referencing.
But it is kind of on brand for a socialist, I guess.
Oh my goodness. Okay, first off, that's not what they said. Those who elected them, the operatives who elected him, who are going to move on to their next operation, their next political pack, and scam a bunch of working class donors, Republican working class donors, Democratic working class donors, into their next thing. These are operatives they're talking about. And Molly, with all due respect, you should be careful about rounding up. Donald Trump rounded up folks and kept them at the border and forced hysterectomies. So we have to remember exactly where we've been. And most recently, that is ICE concentration camps at the border.
I got to go, but what do you make of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez threatening to quit politics if she doesn't get her way, if more people don't?
So they are going, thank you. But if they're going to call us socialists, it'll be like, okay, you want to do the fears of Venezuela? We have to flash it back and say, your president did this. Don't you dare say let's remind you who you were. And I feel like Democrats don't do that. Mm-hmm. Open it up. How do we do this? Because they're going to do this from now on. It's like that you've got Jim Clyburn saying, we can't be socialists, we can't be progressives, and no one's more progressive than me, but he's also not in favor of Medicare for all. They're taking the red baiting. They're partnering with the Republicans. They're partnering over the red baiting.
I think that the problem with a lot of these mainstream big donor Democrats is it almost feels like they're trying to make friends, and then it's like that reach across the aisle type thing, and making friends. Republicans, the way they operate, they don't care about who likes them or not. They're like, we got voted in to push this agenda, and that's what we're doing, and that's why I think like their voters and their base is strongly behind them. And Democrats, we feel a lot of people feel like when they vote, they feel betrayed a lot of times, because then they get into these positions like, we got to be kind to them, we got to do this, and on some Feinstein type thing when she did with Amy Coney Barrett. I think we need to get people like AOC who are not scared to really say what they feel and push the agenda and know what they're here for, what they were voted in for.
Yep.
I mean, what do you think, Josh? How do we take them? How do we hold them accountable and stay true to our values and hold the Democrats? I mean, this is just. I'm sorry. Like, why are we in this moment? That's why I was saying concentration camps at the border. Are we seriously, are Democrats really talking about their fear of socialism and turning into Venezuela? What do you think we've been for the last 4 years?
I mean, there's so many. I love how you took it apart piece by piece, but it started, remember, with them pivoting from talking about Republican operatives and then imagining that we're talking about Republican people, right? And so there's also a way that I think that we can be specific with our critique, where we're critiquing institutions and critiquing bad actors in a way that doesn't allow them to make it seem like we are making just like a broad, like, because the thing is, what liberals frequently do is they do criticize Republican voters in the way that the culture war stuff emerges, in the way that it's like insulting voters. And I think there's a way that we can talk about socialist politics in a way that is constantly focused on the actual, the ruling class who are controlling this. But it's going to require our message discipline to keep pivoting back to that, like you did in the clip.
Thanks for watching and listening to The Nomiki Show. But remember to click like and subscribe on YouTube, and please share on social media. If you're not already a patron, please join us for as low as $5 a month on patreon.com/The Nomiki Show for early and special content. That investment makes a huge difference. We are not corporate media raking in the dough. It's really you guys that are keeping us going. So please consider being a patron. And to our current patrons, thank you so much. We are incredibly grateful to you. We also now have swag. So check us out on thenomikishow.com to get your mugs, your totes, and your stickers.